It's the Franklin Show from Franklin with your favorite pup, Franklin Delano Roosevelt Sinatra Seltzer, and his owner, the infamous Michael Seltzer. I'm your Doc, Doug Podell, professional announcer, and no money was exchanged for this announcement. Trust me. Here's Franklin.
And thank you to my fabulous band and to this audience for being here. All of you standing outside in the rain and being so patient. You'll be rewarded. Everybody in the studio audience is going to get a paw print from Franklin just for being here. That's right, thank you, all of you. A paw print from Franklin, a collectible indeed. We have a great show for you once again. We are excited about it, and we will start the show right after this.
For decades, I've taught you everything I know. But only you can prevent wildfires.
I am very excited to introduce my next guest and a crazy story on how this happened. But first of all, let me just show you this book, because if you are a fan of the Harry O TV series from the 70s, you're going to be thrilled at the gentleman that you're about to meet. And here's how this all started, because this is just crazy. Harry O is back on TV thanks to the wonderful folks at MeTV. They're airing it every Sunday night, paired with The Fugitive, which was David Jansen's other major show. And it's an unbelievably electrifying and entertaining detective show. Harry Orwell, played by David Jansen. And there's a character on the show that was an ongoing, it started to be a one-off, and it became an ongoing character. And a couple weeks ago, I was watching the show with Franklin, and I posted this on Facebook on the Harry O page, and it basically is a picture of David Jansen and my guest, and it says, I am just watching last night's episode of Harry O with Lester, dressing like Harry, and it's a reminder of the absolute brilliance of this series. And after I posted that online, I'm looking at the people who had liked the post, and I see, I don't know whether you can read this or not, James, but it's on my phone. Les Lannom liked my post. And so I thought to myself, that's Lester, the actor. And then I decided I was just going to reach out via Facebook Messenger and just say, hey, Les, I just watched you on Harry O. You were brilliant as the character Lester, and I'd love to have you on the show. And a few minutes later, my phone rings, and it's Les Lannom calling me. And I was just like, are you kidding? So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the great actor, Les Lannom. Welcome to the Franklin Show.
Thanks, man. Thank you very much.
I am telling you, when you called me just last week, my wife and I were just sitting down after watching this episode, and my phone rings, and I look at it, and it says Les Lannom. And I said to my wife,
Who the hell is that?
How crazy is that? And I picked up the phone, put you on speaker, and we had like a half-hour great conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
I tell you what, I mean, I really do appreciate what you said about my performance and about that show in general. I loved doing Harry O. I absolutely adored David Jansen. He was top drawer all the way, I think. And but you know, all that praise, I won't be able to hold my head up. You know,
well, that's okay. But the way you played that role, that was supposed to be a one-off. You were just this character, this young kid who comes to meet Harry and decides you want to be a detective just like him. And that last scene in that particular episode where you're dressed in the same clothing with the khaki pants and the blue shirt and the jacket and the tie, and he looks at you and says, "What are you doing?" And
Yeah,
you
what
said,
are you do?
what are
What
you
are you doing here? And what are you doing dressed like that?
Right. It was just hilarious.
Yeah,
It
sure.
was such an underappreciated show. It lasted for 2 seasons. There's a story that you know. Why don't you tell the Fred Silverman story? Why
Oh,
Ontario got canceled?
well, David had worked on something for Fred Silverman, and Fred Silverman's was working on O'Hare U.S. Treasury for a different network. I think it was NBC. I'm not. I believe it was NBC. And David was friends with Jack Webb. Jack asked him if he'd do this thing. So uh, what was it?
O'Hara.
O'Hara.
Yeah.
And so David said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So David did, but he said that Jack, he said, I love him. And I've known him for 100 years. We get together socially. He said, but I cannot work with him. And I said, what's the matter? He said, well, he said, we'd shoot a scene with some young actor, and it would be kind of a little bit of an emotional scene. And the guy would put some oomph into it, and Jack would go in, and I can't talk foul on this, can I?
Yeah, you can. Sure, you can.
I can. Okay. Well, Jack, he said Jack would come into the studio. He said I'd be in the watching the dailies, and Jack would say, "What the hell is this bullshit? Who is this cocksucker? Get rid of him.
Well,
If
that
you
might
can't do the, if you can't do it," he said, "what is this melodramatic bullshit?" He said, "If you can't do it straight, hire him. Get somebody who can."
yeah.
So, and David said, it was day after day of this, and he did when they offered him, asked him to come back for a second year. He declined. Well, Fred Silverman got a little bit peevish about that. He didn't like to be told no, I suppose.
And Fred Silverman
Nobody does
ultimately
necessarily.
became the president of ABC.
Well, he was the head of programming.
Right.
At least at
Oh,
that
okay,
at least when I was there, he was the head of programming.
right.
And he had been head of programming at NBC, and that really,
Yeah.
he didn't like to have his power and authority thwarted, I suppose.
Right.
So David didn't go back. They wrote the pilot. What's his name? Oh gosh, now I can't think. Jerry Thorpe and oh hell, what's his name? The writer. Anyway, they created
Howard Rodman.
Howard Rodman. Thank you.
Yeah.
Howard and Jerry collaborated on writing the pilot for Harry O. And so David was doing that. Now we did the pilot. I had a very small role in the first one. My name was librarian assistant. Very memorable, and I found myself, this was very odd. I found myself standing like I was opposite, working with a guy that I had admired for years and years and years. Back, my God, I saw him before Richard Diamond, Private Detective. I saw him on screen at a movie in Ring of Fire.
Right.
And yeah, I don't think I ever told him about that. But that was I think that's the first memory that I have of David. And then of course my dad and I used to watch The Fugitive, or Richard Diamond before that, and then The Fugitive.
Right.
And so here I was standing across from the guy with my hands in my pockets, my head, I had my head slightly canted forward, downward, and looking at him up from under my eyebrows. And he asked me a question. He says, suppose I wanted to get some drugs, what would you say? Well, here I am standing with my weight on one foot, my whole shoulders kind of hunched up, my hands in my pockets, and my head down. I say, I don't know. I don't do drugs. I don't know. And then they cut back to David. He says, and David is standing with his weight on one foot, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders shrugged up, his head down, him looking up under his eyebrows. He says, you just think it's too dangerous to tell me. And then he turns and he walks away. And I went doing the instant replay in my mind as I was going to my car. I thought, oh my Lord, what have I done? I was mirroring David Jansen. And I thought, oh Jesus, that you don't. It's a bad thing to mimic the star of a show if you're a you know
Yeah.
just a guest actor. That's really very dumb, very ungood, as one of my friends says.
But he loved it.
And well, I don't think he noticed at first. I don't know. I didn't tell anybody about this. I thought, oh
No.
Jesus, I'll be lucky I'll never work with him again. I'll be lucky if I ever work in this town
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
So I'm going home or going to my car, and I just messed up I just hit my little music stand. I messed up my
That's all right.
there we are. And so I thought, oh, gee, I'll certainly never work with him. I'll be lucky if I work in this town again. But the word gets out that, yeah, listen, you don't want to hire this guy. He tries to mimic the star. Well, I went to the screening with my then wife, Kathy, and she was a very good analyst, very good critic of things. And my scene came and went, and it was a short scene, about 3 minutes, I guess. It only took us about a half hour to shoot the whole thing,
Mhm.
and but she elbowed me in the ribs and said, "What were you doing?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Don't give me that. What you mean? Bullshit. What were you doing?" I said, She said, "You were doing David Jansen. Are you crazy?" I didn't think anybody would notice. She said, "Not notice? Are you nuts?" And then she said what was in my mind. You'll never work it. You'll be lucky if you ever work in this town again. You'll certainly never work with him once he sees this. I said, yeah, well, 2 years went by. The first year, years went, or a year went by, I guess, and they or two no, it was 2 years. And they wrote a script called Gertrude with Julie Summers playing my sister. And they asked me if I'd like to do a week on Harriet on the pilot, and I said, or on the first episode. And I said, well, yeah, sure. So I went down to San Diego and I shot this thing.
Mhm.
And in the course of it, David, we were at the foot of a staircase, and David was doing a monologue, and or part of a dialogue, and he looked at me, and then he burst out laughing uproariously, and around the camera came Jerry Thorpe. What's he doing, David? What did he do? What's the matter? What's wrong? And I know that Jerry thought that I was trying to break up the star. I wasn't. That's another very ungood thing to do. You don't come in as a guest actor and then try to break up the star. You don't try to upstage the star.
Happens to me all the time. You have
Yeah,
no
I'm
idea.
sure it does. I'm sure it does. And you got to be careful about that. Well, uh, David, bless his heart, he said, no, no, it wasn't his fault. He said, he did a take and it was so perfect. I got involved in his performance, and he said, I won't do it again. I'll be good. I promise. I'll be good. I thought, bless your heart. Oh boy. And so we shot that, and then he said to they at the end, almost toward the end of the day, he said they ought to be doing your turnaround while you're hot. He said, but they've got to shoot out through the door, out, get the sky outside, and if we wait any longer, we're going to lose the light. We'll have to come back tomorrow, and nobody will be happy. And I said, yeah. And he said, they really shouldn't. They should be shooting you right now. I said, that's okay. I don't mind. I said, that's what I'm here for. He said, well, okay. He said, it happened to me last night. I said, don't worry about it. Well, we shot. I shot I was down there for, I think, 3, 4 days, went back, did it. They had it on the air in 2 weeks, which was unheard of. Very
Yeah.
fast turnaround time. I mean,
Right.
sound was balanced, color, everything. It was the sound, the music, score, and it was on the air, and it got pretty decent ratings. Then a month later, they reran it. I guess they were short of material. I don't know. Anyway, they reran it, and then a few months went by, and I was called and asked if I would do a show, and I went in, and it was Lester.
Yeah.
And I was looking at it. Richard Lang was the director of it. Richard had directed me before in Kung Fu, an episode of Kung Fu that I had done, and then he'd been the second director or first AD on the pilot for Harry-O, such stuff as Dreams Are Made On.
Right.
And anyway,
They liked you. You were
yeah,
good.
I,
You were
I was
good.
I was stunned. I was
And
absolutely
it was
dumbstruck.
a great character. This character, Lester,
Yeah.
was this unique, young, crazy, and you couldn't. And the whole show was so well crafted because David Jansen is just an absolutely spectacular actor. Coming off of The Fugitive, where he was so somber and downtrodden, and averting his eyes in every scene. In Harry-O, he's this upbeat, crazy kind of, he has great answers to every question. He gets under the skin of the police detective that runs the department. Anthony Zerbe played one character, and the other actor, I can't think of at this very moment, but the rapport and the dialogue between them. And this was very much in the vein of Rockford Files. And Rockford Files lasted for 7, 8 seasons. Harry-O absolutely should have lasted were it not for Fred Silverman, who had a grudge against Jansen over the O'Hara series. It would have gone on. But there are 44 episodes, I believe, and every one of them is spectacular. And there are people out there that are rediscovering the show again because of MeTV, and it's just a great series. And how fortunate were you to be able to be on that show?
Oh boy,
semi-regular.
Well, the first episode, the character was patterned after the one I did in Gertrude.
Yes.
And that guy was, he was not dumb. He was just out of phase. He and his sister had this synergistic relationship, and they communicated very well with each other. But they both seemed very off the wall to to the casual observer, and that was one of the things that supposedly appealed to Harry Orwell about Gertrude. She was little daft. And Lester was as well.
Well, and the fact that your name is Les, and they played a character named Lester is just. It couldn't have been better. It was obvious.
Well, I had the good sense to not tell them. No, my name is actually Leslie.
Right. Well, what difference?
Yeah. That could have gone south.
But you had the chops, and you did a great job in that show. And then you've had a wonderful career. You've been on so many great TV shows, in so many great movies. You were in Centennial with Jansen also, which was, I think, the last thing.
It's funny. I did not work with David. David did the voiceover.
You were in the series.
I was in the series, and I went over to Warner's. I went on the set where he was. I had taken him a crockery jug of Irish whiskey, a Tullamore Dew Irish whiskey, and David said he was half Irish and half Jewish, and he said he had the demons of being Irish were over drinking, and the demons of being Jewish were overeating. He said so.
I never heard that before.
Dead on both sides, yeah.
Yes.
But I got over there and I walked over and he said, "It's Boof Coker." And I was sitting beside him, and he was with Sharon Gless and the director, Virgil Vogel, and he'd been calling, and the director had been calling the character Boof Coker, spelled Bufe, and I had a friend. Well, he was my dad's age, maybe a little older, who assisted in my learning how to ride a horse when I was about 11 years old, and his name was Buford Howard. Well, David said, "It's Boof Coker," and I said, "No, it's Buf." He said, "Buf. I've been calling it Boof." He said, "The director's been calling it Boof." I said, "Well, I don't." And I told him the story of Buford Howard, and who had taught me to ride or assisted, and he said, "Oh boy," he said, well, he told me later, he said, "Well, I told the director," he said, "we can't call him Boof, we got to call him Buf." He said, "If you call him Buf, you're going to have one pissed off actor." He said, "Because he had a favorite uncle or something, the name was Buford."
Oh,
So it was Buf Coker, and but but he, oh God, David was funny. David was a funny guy. I walked up to him. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no,
You,
you go ahead. You
well,
walked up to David and
I walked up to David's trailer one time. Now, David used to, I'd come in and talk. If I was working, it was one thing. If I was not working, it didn't matter. Come on in. Listen, what are you doing? Listen, come on in here. What are you drinking? And I said, well, most of the time I didn't have a drink at all. But I came over this one time with this box in a bag, and inside the box was a crockery jug of Tullamore Dew Irish whiskey. And I knocked on the door, and he opens the door, and he says to Elliot Shapiro, his driver, he says, "The Irish kid's here. Hide the booze." And he said, "Listen," and I said, he said, "Come on, get in here." And I said, I didn't come to drink your booze." I said, "You're always so generous with me. I wanted to try to give something back." I said, "Here." And I handed him this package, and David took it, and he said, "What, a gift for me?" And I honestly, I saw tears well up in his eyes. And then he followed it up by saying, "Only one?" At which point I cracked up. He said, "Get in here, Lester. Come on, get in here. Have
well,
a seat."
you are so fortunate to have had those experiences with an actor who will go down in history for so many of us who remember. He was one of the greatest television actors we've ever had. He died way too young at the age of 48. I'll never forget the day he died. I was in my office at about 6 o'clock, and they broke in. I had a TV on because I was in the media, and I had always had a TV on, and they broke in to say actor David Jansen has died.
And television star David Jansen died of apparently a heart attack at his home in Malibu Beach, California. He was 49. Jansen is perhaps best remembered as the falsely accused murderer in The Fugitive, who dodged pursuers through 5 television seasons.
And I was just in shock. And then my phone began to ring because people knew how much I loved The Fugitive and everything that he had done. What a spectacular opportunity you had in your life to know him. And so I guess I'm just grateful to speak to somebody like you who had that relationship. I've also had the great opportunity to get to know Barry Morse, who played Lieutenant Gerard in The Fugitive. And so I've come across 2 outstanding actors over my illustrious history who were that close to David Jansen. And boy, what a wonderful thing that is. So Les,
Yeah, I don't know what Barry had to say about it. I never met Barry Morse.
Barry loved him. They were like he never stopped talking. I had the great opportunity to bring Barry Morse back to Detroit back in 1993 when the Harrison Ford Fugitive movie came out to host an all-night marathon of hand-selected Fugitive episodes that I selected, and he did the intros. And Barry was the most spectacular. He's British. I don't know if you knew that. He was British.
Yeah, I thought he was Canadian. He's not Canadian then.
He was not Canadian, but he spent a lot of time in Toronto. So he had 2 homes in London, Ontario, and in London, England. And I was fortunate to spend time with him in both. And we had a great relationship all the way until his passing, but he lived into his 90s, and we had an ongoing friendship. We were in touch, and it was an honor to know him as well. But it's an honor for me to know you and to find you so approachable. I'll never forget just a simple little message on Facebook, and boom, Les Lannom is calling. So I'm very
Well, yeah, I think I called you on Facebook too, didn't I?
yes, you did. Yes, you
Yeah.
did. So, Art, let's talk very briefly about other career opportunities you've had. You were on Kung Fu. What are some of the other notables in your illustrious career?
I I worked on 2 episodes of Centennial,
Right.
and one of the things that I seem to be proficient at is doing dialects and voices. I went to a guy, I can't remember his name, but to learn to do to do character voices for cartoons or whatever. And he said one of the things to do is to do a bad imitation of a star of some sort, of somebody well known. And I would do them, and he said you can't use. He said you can't use any of those. I said why? He said they're too spot on. They're too. They You sound like the guy. You can't do that. I
You're
said
not
oh
being bad. You're supposed to be bad.
yeah. So I ended up with working with David. I ended up.
Well, you do a pretty good
I
David
don't.
Chance.
I don't know why he did enjoy that. This is all okay. This is off the topic that you opened, but I on the first Lester, I showed up at the beach, and he and I went walking down the beach single file, and I'd get out of step, and I was saying things like, and I think we can go out. I think it'd be great we can go out solving crimes together. You always have a ride, and I'd get experience, and we could be like all the famous detective duos in the past. Teams, Spade and Archer, or Batman and Robin, and
Right.
Holmes and Watson, and he looks around at me like, "What in the hell?" Jesus, whoa! And he looks up at the sky like, "I didn't do this. I did not ask for this." And I said, and he looks at me, and then the voiceover says, "Batman and Robin Cato." He said the only one he left out was Cato and the Green Hornet. He said, but I liked Lester in spite of his smiling in all the wrong. He said I
Right. You
smiled in the
smiled
wrong
in all the
places. He
wrong
said,
places.
all the quirks in that and the smiling in the wrong. I liked him. He said those are the ones you got to watch out for. Well, we're walking down the beach, and he looks around at me, and I'm out of step, and I do a little hesitation strut, and then he turns and shakes his head and keeps walking, and I get in step behind him. Well, we were almost at Paradise. We were filming at Paradise Cove, California, which is up north of Malibu, and I believe it's a south-facing beach. Zuma Beach and Paradise Cove are sort of face the south. But we're walking along, and there's a great restaurant bar there called the Sandcastle, and we're getting close. David says, "I don't know if this is Lang's idea of a joke. I ain't laughing." he said, he said, if he doesn't call cut pretty soon, I'm going to the bar. You with me? I said, I'm with you. He said, all right. And then they yelled, cut. Come on back, David. All is forgiven. He said, shit. He said, just that close to a clean getaway. And we walked back. And I, of course, am dressed exactly. Well, they had me in the double wardrobe. Well, I had the shirts were easy to find, but they had the Glen Plaid sport coat
Right.
and a black tie,
Right.
and the chino pants.
Right.
Oh Lord,
that was a
yeah. What are you doing? And then what are you doing just like that? but we were getting we started toward the beach house, and I said, this wasn't my idea. He said, what? And I kind of gestured. He said, oh, the suit? Oh, don't worry about it. It's cute. We'll do anything on this show. And so we did. We did just any. When I would run out of inspiration, um, or sometimes at the end of the day, the tank gets a little low, and if I, he would say, do what I'm doing, do what I'm doing. I said, what? So he grabbed his. In one of them, we were looking over the shoulder of Key Luke at something in a microscope, and so he reaches over and grabs his lapel with his right hand, and he's leaning over. So I said, he should, yeah, okay. And so we shot the scene like that. But if I would, I generally didn't run out of ideas. He
Sounds
was.
like it was a creative group.
Oh, he was.
Yeah.
And he was an absolute master at understanding the requirements of and characteristics of working in television.
Yeah.
By that, I sat down. I was waiting to do this scene, and he's sitting with his fingers, his hands folded together, and he says, "You're gonna sit like that?" And I said, "Like what?" He said, "Bad casting." I said, "Bad casting." I thought he was talking about me being not a good actor, and they should have hired somebody else. He was always threatening to have them hire a trained animal actor, a dog or something, to replace me. But he said, I said, bad casting, and he said, yeah, you see this line coming across my face here?
No,
I said,
bad casting.
yeah. He said, it's shadow. He said, he said, I don't mind if you want to sit there. That I don't mind. He said, but if you sit like that, I've got to sit like this. And he shifted just a little bit, and the shadow went like that, just disappeared. And I thought, how did he do that? Now I was trained in broadcasting. I know lighting a little to a degree. I'm not a great expert at it, but I understand camera angles and the difference between grabbing to the right or left or dollying in or dollying back, whatever. And I know that,
Natural
but
intuition of these things. Right?
that was, I mean, the line was just.
Right.
I followed his finger and I said, "How did he know that?"
Yeah, he had that.
That's being really in tune. And he used to rib me because we
So,
had this. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
so I got to wrap this up because we're at
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I just want to say this is a great book. You wrote the foreword, and just your foreword is worth the price of the book. But if you're a Harry O fan, and the beauty of social media is, anything that you loved in the past, there is a page for it. There's a fugitive page. There's a Harry O page. There's a highway patrol page. If you're a television fanatic like I am, you can find people, and you can even get to know the stars of the shows like Les Lannom. So Les, I just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And I'm really grateful that you reached out so quickly. I really respect you for that and appreciate you for that. And I know the people that love the show and love your work are going to really enjoy this interview. So thank you for being
Thank
here.
you. Well, I thank you very much for having me. My relationship with David Jansen was one of the best things that ever happened to me, certainly professionally. I adored the guy, and he was so easy to work with, didn't take himself seriously, took his work very seriously.
Right.
And that was, I think that those were two, and he had a great sense of humor. Those were three characteristics that we shared, and it just, I don't know, it went together like that, like a well-shuffled deck of cards.
I know one thing that he probably didn't share with you, and that is your bagpipe professionalism. And the next time I have you on the show, I want to hear you play the bagpipes because I know you're very.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
All right.
They're so bloody loud. I mean, I tell you what, if you've got a party, invite me. I can clear a room like that.
Well,
when you're ready for them to go home,
I'll keep that.
Have me light up those pipes.
You bet. Les, thanks for being here. I appreciate you.
Thank you. It was indeed a pleasure. I could go on and on, as you could tell. I could go on and on and on and
Well,
on
you know
talking
what?
about
There was
David.
Lester Part 1 and Lester Part 2 and on and on and on.
And number 3, Lester 1, Lester 2,
All
and
right.
then
We got to go.
5 and
Thanks,
done.
Les. Thank you.
Okay.
Everybody, stay tuned for more exciting and riveting entertainment here on The Franklin Show. We'll be right back.
Look at that. It's so sad.
And I am so grateful to this wonderful studio audience, to my band, to my announcer, to the great cast of characters that work so hard behind the scenes making this show a reality every week. We look forward to seeing you again next week right here on The Franklin Show. Good night, everybody.